Hi, welcome to Week 10, Lecture 2 in the Sociology of Work and Technology.
Hey you! You lose it, you lose it, you lose it, you lose it, you gotta say.
So, just to frame this reading on app-based gig work, I want you to recall earlier readings on changes to the Canadian labor market. Canada, like a lot of countries in Europe, as well as the United States, has experienced an uptick in what is called precarious work. There's an excellent report from the House of Commons on this issue, and you're welcome to go and look that up on your own time. Now, in Canada, there's been a decrease overall in the number of workers who earn $15 an hour or more. That decrease occurred and continues to occur starting in the 10-year period from 2007 to 2018. There's also been, in the same time, an increase in what is called non-standard work, which refers to temporary employment, involuntary part-time employment, and the self-employed who have no employees. So you might ask, what does that mean for workers? Well, wages are going down for a lot of people because of an increase in low-wage work. And there's also been an increase in making people not employees. These non-standard workers are more likely to be injured. They're more likely to face harassment. They're more likely to suffer wage theft, where they're not paid for work that's performed. They're also more likely to find themselves unable to rise up within an organization, because they're not an employee. They're also unable to organize in a union, oftentimes. Now, contrary to many of the myths about the flexibility offered by these non-standard arrangements, most people find themselves working harder despite this flexibility. And they find themselves, especially those earning less than $15 an hour, often find that they're required to be flexible in order to meet the needs of their boss. And so labor has to be flexible while businesses can do whatever they want. Flexibility, in fact, makes people more anxious, more unsettled, as they're constantly trying to work and to find a stable work schedule. Most people prefer a standard job with a set schedule of hours. Think about the readings on time from a week or so ago. People were stressed out about how to use their time, and so they actually had less free time, despite being flexible. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't really sound that enjoyable to me. So in this context, I want you to think about gig or app-based employment, gig work or app-based employment. This is generally project-based or temporary work that's organized through an app or some other piece of software. So we have delivery services like Uber Eats, Postmates, Foodora, Deliveroo, cleaning services, transportation services like Uber. You have manual labor services where you can hire people to perform kind of tasks or to deliver things for you. And then you have micro tasks, which we'll read about more in a few weeks when we read about Mechanical Turk. So what does all this have to do with classification, you might ask? Well, first, let's ask, how are gig workers classified? They're considered independent contractors. Well, what differentiates an employee from an independent contractor, you might ask? Well, there are laws for this. They vary from province to province, from country to country, but generally the difference is that an employee is under control of the employing organization, and an employee performs tasks at specified times and in specified ways. An independent contractor, on the other hand, generally just has to complete a job in whatever way they see fit. They're hired to complete something, and they independently take care of that. Now, as seen in the reading from Sarah Kessler's book, Gigged, many platform companies attempt to blur these lines on purpose. This raises the question, are gig economy workers independent contractors or are they employees? Sometimes that they're told what to do and when to work. In fact, they're often told when and how to work. And yet companies insist that these are not employees. Now, why might a company do that? Well, classification in this instance is a form of cost avoidance. The companies do not have to pay as many taxes. They do not have to pay as much in insurance or maintenance costs, supply costs, and other costs that are associated with having employees. You can see this a bit in Kessler's chapter, Don't Call Us, in which a cleaning service instructs workers to not call them if any problem arises. The workers also have to pay for supplies, for any kind of promotional materials to, kind of hype up their services. And they also have to pay for other things that are typically paid for by an employer. To this end, companies spend a lot of time framing these gig jobs as entrepreneurship rather than as low-waged employment. They frame these jobs as providing freedom and flexibility. This should sound familiar. It's what Boltanski and Chiapello described as the new spirit of capitalism, in which we receive freedom in the ability to participate at the expense of stability and labor protections. Now, in the optional readings for this week, I provide a handful of examples of struggles over classification. For example, Uber drivers in the UK were recently classified as employees and given paid holidays as well as a minimum wage. Uber maintained its claim of giving people freedom and said, well, if drivers were classified as workers, they would inevitably lose some of the freedom and flexibility that comes from being their own boss. Uber did much the same in the United States, where the company spent millions of dollars on a political campaign against a law that would have made all their drivers employees rather than independent contractors. The company spent millions of dollars convincing drivers to vote against their own interests as workers, and that campaign worked. Uber has no obligations to drivers now in the state of California, which is a population similar in size to Canada. So that's a fairly large economy with a lot of drivers. In these examples, workers sought to be classified as employees rather than independent contractors. They did so in order to gain protections from the state. At the same time, gig economy businesses sought to maintain the classification of workers as independent contractors. Now, in these examples, the struggle over classification is also a class struggle, insofar as business owners are struggling to maintain a system of classification that serves their interests. Workers, unions, and labor lawyers often struggle to change these classifications to serve the interests of workers. I'll see you next week when we talk more about platforms and work.